Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Roberta Marongiu, Assistant Professor of Genetics and Neuroscience at the Neurological Surgery at Weill Cornell Medicine, with appointments also at the Fell Family Brain and Mind Institute at the Department of Genetic Medicine. She trained alongside giants in the field, including Nobel laureates. Dr. Roberta Marongiu has emerged as one of the leading voices on the critical role of biological sex, ovarian hormones, and menopause in Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. She's not just a brilliant researcher, she's a passionate bridge builder. After the 2013 World WPC, where she heard directly from patients about their daily struggles, she also co-founded Stop PD, support and training to overcome Parkinson's disease. Dr. Marongiu has a major work ongoing on sex differences and menopause, and she is literally changing lives for women with PD. So let's thank her for being here, and let's just directly jump into the question. Roberta Marongiu, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for making the time. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to immediately jump in all the question. You are an extremely valuable source of information, and I would like to start by letting know our audience who you are, how did you start? So you have been trained with some of the greatest minds in Parkinson research, including a Nobel laureate. What drew you specifically to Parkinson's disease and to in particular explore the territory of biological sex difference, gender differences, and then women field in Parkinson?
Okay, that's a question that everybody asks me. And my first answer is I got into Parkinson's by chance. Into grad school, I just happened to start working on Parkinson's disease. I started working with an amazing scientist that discovered one of the genes that are associated with Parkinson's disease. And Maria Valente, she discovered the gene PINK1. And she's one of my greatest mentors. And after that, I was hooked. I never left the field. And then I continued and I worked with the person that developed the very first gene therapy for Parkinson's disease, Michael Caplet. With Mike, then I started working with Paul Greengard, who's the Nobel laureate, and so on and so on. So I was very lucky to work with amazing people and still am. And then by really interacting with the patients, though, is by talking with people with Parkinson's, is that I realized where the gaps in research were, where the gaps in understanding were, and the needs were. That's where my research really, when I started launching my own career and my own lab, is when I started realizing what was missing. And that was understanding really the differences between men and women, and that we really didn't know anything about the experiences of women with Parkinson's and how we address the needs of women with Parkinson's. Because all the research has been done in males, male animals, in men. The gold standard drug that is being used for 60, 70 years now in patients, the levodopa, has been developed in clinical trials that enroll pretty much men. And so we still don't know how to tailor this drug for women. And so there is so much that we still need to do for women. And that's how my career was launched.
That's beautiful. But tell me, why do you think there is still these persistent gaps? It's something that it's, though, very common also in other conditions, not only PD, that all the research is targeted on men, based on men. Why?
There are different reasons. In basic research, using males makes research sometimes somewhat easier. It's a misconception. It's not true. I want to put that out there. It's not true. It's misconception that using females make research harder because of the estrous cycle that needs to be monitored, because the estrous cycle will somewhat alter the results or bias the results. it's not true. It just needs a little bit extra effort to be monitored. But in my experience, does not make science more difficult, it makes science more rigorous, and it's important to get it done. Because if we don't get it done, we don't get the right answers. And so another reason could be lack of funding, because when you have to study both males and females, you have to double your numbers in research, right? And so sometimes, especially when you start your science, you have to start from basic research before you can get to clinical trials. When you have to count your budget, you have to make some choices. And if the budget is short, you have to, trim somewhere. And unfortunately, the trimming has happened at disadvantage of the women. So, yeah.
You've always emphasized translating research into better quality of life for people. And I would like, though, to remain on women for a moment. So when it comes, let's say, to perimenopause, to menopause, to all the hormonal shift, also like specific cycles for women, they have some impact on the symptoms, on their biology, on the progression, potential of the condition. So in practical terms, what should women know about this? And what would maybe be some question that you would like to, say, trigger for women?
Okay. Some questions that I think women with Parkinson should ask themselves, their support group, their doctors, is how hormones can influence their symptoms, how hormones can influence their therapeutic effectiveness. There are changes that happen, and they can be different depending on the reproductive stage in which a woman is in life, because a woman could be diagnosed with Parkinson's before, during, or after menopause. I mean, most women on average are diagnosed in postmenopause, but there are also cases of young onset. And so in those cases, hormones play a big role in regulating the way symptoms are experienced and in the way the medication can provide benefit to relieving symptoms, because depending on how hormones fluctuate can really interfere or can either interfere or potentiate the way the medication works. And so they should be aware of this, and they should have a conversation with their doctor about it. Not that we know how to tailor the dosage. We don't know that, because as I said, there haven't been done clinical trials to figure out a equation to calculate these things. But at least there has to be a conversation, because there are a lot of self-reports of, and that's what I'm trying to study right now. I'm trying to do it in the lab. I'm trying to set up some clinical trials to figure out exactly how do we tailor the dosage? How do we understand how these hormones really affect the symptoms? Because there have been a lot of self-reports from women saying that in certain times of the month, when they take the medications, their symptoms are so severe and so strong, they become really debilitating. And so this is a conversation that needs to be, that needs to happen with the doctors. And if the doctors are not aware of these things, that it's a broader conversation that needs to be open with maybe a gynecologist or with like a support team that every patient should have. I don't think a patient should only refer to a single doctor. They should always try to have a support team that is, a family member, a neurologist, in case of the women, a gynecologist, and, physical therapist or different individuals that play a different role in their lives that can really provide a full support at different angles, because not everybody has all the information. And so the support has to come together to provide a 360 degrees information.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you for this. I like very much how you put it, because sometimes I feel that indeed people feel lost, but they would very much like to have the answer just from one profile.
Yeah,
But
not
PD,
possible.
yeah, PD is so complex. We need many different profiles and
Yeah.
many different expertises. So thank you for this. Anchoring on one of the points that you just mentioned, and let's say staying not only precisely or specifically on Parkinson only, but more on brain health, is there something there that we should also encourage women to know in terms of just perimenopause and menopause? They trigger major changes even in the brain nowadays, we know. So we know, for example, that as we lose estradiol, a drop in estrogen, sometimes, of course, before the menstrual cycle, but then in perimenopause, apart feeling more symptoms or worsening of the symptoms, do we know what's really happening in the brain?
Well, one thing that I want to say is that most of the estrogen in the body is made by the ovaries. A very small percentage by the brain, but most is made by the ovaries. However, estrogen acts in the whole body. So it acts on many organs, not only on the ovaries. And it's a very strong modulator of brain function. And so when we go through perimenopause and then in postmenopause, the brain goes through major changes because it has to adapt to these fluctuations. During perimenopause, what you have is that people imagine a perimenopause as a gradual loss of estrogen levels that eventually in postmenopause, the levels go taper down to very low levels, right? But actually, that's not what happens. What happens in perimenopause is the levels fluctuate really erratically. And there are also some spikes that are higher in terms of concentration that are higher on levels that you may have during menopause. And are those erratic concentrations and spikes, they really send the brain a little bit crazy. I mean, I don't want to use the word crazy. I'm using it in a sense that disorient the brain. They put in a brain in a state that doesn't know what's happening, okay? And so there are a lot of physiological changes because it is a physiological process, physiological changes that happens gradually, but they are unexpected and that they keep fluctuating up and down over the course of a few years, that the brain has to adjust. And so I see the perimenopause years actually a physiological stage that is a stage of stronger impact for the brain than the postmenopause, because once you get in postmenopause, then the levels get stabilized. They're more stable, and then the brain adjusts to that, and it gets to a more even levels of estrogen, right? And then it gets to a steady state where I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but what I'm trying to say is that the perimenopause stage is more a adjustment period, okay? Yeah. And so there are a lot of things that happen because there are many brain regions that are influenced by estrogen. Yeah. And all these brain regions do many things. It's not just about motor function, because estrogen regulates mood, it regulates autonomic function, it regulates motor function. It regulates many, many things. It regulates neuroplasticity. When we talk about Parkinson's disease, a lot of people talk about neuroprotection from neuronal cell death. It does a lot of things in the cells, and that's when it becomes very complex. And so it is something that it is difficult to study, and that's why we are where we are right now. It's not because we're not doing a good job. It's just a very complicated thing to understand because estrogen does so many things. And the perimenopause is such a complicated period that we need time.
But so what I'm hearing also, and tell me if I understood this correctly, it seems like that one of the critical part, it's not so much just the loss of estrogen, but really the fluctuations
Yes.
this peaks. And this makes me think almost in a completely different, let's say, set up and feel, but the insulin spikes that sometimes, it's
Right.
like that,
Right.
going up and down, is
Right.
even more than, just
Right.
a more steady state.
Right. And one thing we're learning from other studies, not on Parkinson's disease, because there is not as much on Parkinson's, but like from Alzheimer's or from neuroscience studies, is that there are some symptoms of menopause, like hot flashes, for instance, that are correlate with the severity. Usually the severity of the hot flashes correlate with how severe these fluctuations are and how strong a woman changes during perimenopause are. And that could also reflect how strong the changes in the brain are happening and how well a woman could be responding to hormone replacement. So not every woman is going to have the same symptoms of perimenopause. You can have women that have some symptoms, women that have no symptoms. A small percentage may not have no symptoms. And so we are learning, we're trying to figure out how to correlate the plethora of all these symptoms to what's happening to the brain and what to predict, what can come next, and how the brain is going to shape into the risk for future disorders. So,
May I ask if there is any woman's story or a specific woman that inspired you to, not only for your research, but even more like on a clinical side, like any story that, let's say, still stays with you?
I don't know. I met so many, I have to be honest. They're so amazing. And right now, I don't want to make names. I want to be honest. Right now, I'm working with a group of amazing women, 3 or 4 of them, that I'm actually doing some research with them. So because it's been difficult to find data that we could in the lab analyze to understand the role of hormones in Parkinson's disease, in women with Parkinson's disease, then I was lucky enough to meet these women that have Parkinson's that were already advocating for this type of research. And I got together with them and we decided to start working together. And it's really inspiring to do research with them. And so it's been amazing. Actually, here this week at the World Parkinson's Congress, we're presenting our research together, and it's amazing. We still have a long way to go, but we're going to publish our papers and we're going to do more work together. And that really inspires my research and my next steps. So I don't want to make names. They know who they are.
We can say hello to them if
yes,
they're going to see
know who they are.
That's wonderful. And tell me, in terms of the research, but let's say forward the vision. If you were to have all the fundings, all the research is possible, let's put it like it's easy, what would be the results that you would like to find for women?
All right. So there are 2 main things that I would like to know. That are my top priorities. One, I would like to know I would like to run a small study where for women that have young onset Parkinson's disease, the main question stands is how are the hormonal fluctuations during the month changing the symptom severity and the response to medications? It seems like a simple question. We don't have an answer. As I said earlier, it's all about self-reports by individual women. There is no quantitative data outside. There is not really studies performed because there are also some challenges that need to be faced in terms of how we're gonna do it, which I think I figured it out. So if I had the funding, I would definitely put the funding into doing that first. And then the second thing that I would like to run would be a larger study, which is to collect the data that it's missing out there, that it's been driving me crazy because I've been trying to find it, and it's lacking because it's really difficult to collect. That would require a longitudinal study of decades, starting when women are premenopausal, following them in peri and then in post, and really collecting all important data from blood measurements to information on clinical data, on brain scans, and everything that can really help us connect all the dots to know how is the disease developing, how are hormones influencing this, and what else is influencing this, because it's not about hormones. Today we're talking about hormones, right? But Parkinson's is a very complex disorder. And so there are other things that can come into play. It could be genetics, could be environmental. And my research is done in the United States, but it's possible that my findings in the United States could not be 100% replicated if the studies were done somewhere else in another continent. And so this will require a lot of funding, but it's a very important question.
Mm-hmm. Can you just, for our audience, briefly explain why the translation from population to population might not be just so straightforward? Because sometimes I think that people do not realize also the importance of ethnicity or like environment.
Yeah, actually one of the strongest risk factors for Parkinson's disease, aside from aging, is environmental exposures. And so there are several compounds, like toxins, that are known to increase the risk of Parkinson's disease. And we've been able in the lab to actually mimic and cause and reproduce, generate models of Parkinson's disease in the lab by using these compounds to prove they actually cause Parkinson's disease. And so we know that doing epidemiological studies, we know that these compounds can actually increase the risk of the disease, and the distribution and the usage of these compounds changes across the globe. And so there are some countries that have banned them and some countries that have not. And the usage of these compounds could be heavier or lighter depending on, how the economy changes from country to country. Some of them are pesticides, so depending on whether an economy of a country is heavier on farming or not, it could be that certain molecules are used more than others. And there are a lot of things that come into play, also government regulations, and it's not just economical. Yeah. And so these environmental exposures that can also come into play together with genetics and hormones, all together to give the end result of what is the risk for every individual to develop Parkinson's disease.
Thank you for clarifying this. There's a critical window, there's like also this critical window hypothesis around hormone therapy. So We saw some research coming out in Alzheimer, in dementia. What are the evidences, if any, for Parkinson? And if not, what would you like to do? And I want to ask you this question precisely on hormonal replacement therapy also because my previous guest has left this question for you. So if we could go
Easy
deeper
into that.
yes.
Okay. Yes, I think it's a question that many women have, especially because, at least here in the United States, because now the FDA has lifted the black label, black box on the use of hormone replacement that was placed decades ago. And what we know so far does not come from the field of Parkinson's disease, like you said. What we know comes from other fields of neuroscience. And the overwhelming hypothesis is that there is a window, so-called, of opportunity during which that overlaps the perimenopause or early postmenopause period. We talk about 5 to 8, 10 years around the period, during which if we administer hormone replacement, then a woman can really take full advantage of this hormone replacement and get benefits from it. And then if this hormone replacement is instead taken after this time window, it may not be beneficial. And actually there is some data coming out from decades ago of the Women Health Initiative showing that actually could be detrimental. And that's why over 30 years ago, the Women Health Initiative was stopped suddenly because women were having cardiovascular issues. And then was found also that some women were having also cognitive dysfunction due to hormone replacements. But that has not been studied for Parkinson's disease, so we don't know. So it's hard to extrapolate whether that would apply. But that is the consensus so far. Then the sooner the better, the earlier the better. Needs to be done. Yeah.
For women that are experiencing this critical, say, transition in their physiology, sometimes they might be scared. Sometimes they don't know if it's just something in their head.
Yeah.
What would you say to them to encourage them to ask questions, to understand it's not just something that they feel, and it's not that they're going crazy, because that's sometimes like really, there's a lot of sometimes dismissal maybe, but really for women, they feel like maybe just me, and it's not. It's something that is like really happening. So how would you just like support them to be braver and ask the right question?
Are we talking about menopausal symptoms or? Yeah. Well, I think every person knows their body, right? And so if you notice a shift, you know yourself better than anyone else. So if you feel there is a shift, then speak up and go see a doctor and explain what the shift is. That's my first advice, okay? And then there is one thing I want to mention is there is a lot of overlap between some symptoms that a woman can experience when it goes through menopause and some symptoms that are experienced, Parkinson's disease symptoms. And so if a woman, unfortunately, is developing Parkinson's disease at the time that is going through menopause, it's really hard to pinpoint if the symptoms is due to one or the other. Or, unfortunately, the other thing I'm going to mention is that sometimes I think women are underdiagnosed Parkinson's disease because the symptoms are they're associated to menopause and not to Parkinson's. And so the doctors likely think that they are going through menopause and they don't refer them, the primary care doctor probably don't refer them to a neurologist because they don't think that that could be Parkinson's disease. And that is not because the doctors don't do their job properly. It's just there is so much overlap between the symptoms that it's hard to pinpoint, as I said. So, and it's just by us doing more work and understanding it better that we will be able to provide the doctor's guidelines to really tell them which guidelines to follow and how to refer the patients one way or another. But I would tell the person to listen to your body and then tell the doctor how your body is changing, and then just keep insisting. Then you know your body best. So, yeah.
Prof. Roberta, I want to pose you one of my favorite questions from my guest. What is your mission?
Well, my mission is to be the best scientist I can and to help women with Parkinson the best way I can. I know it's very general, but I learned over the years that by being very narrow, we close ourselves in a box and we limit ourselves in what we can do and how we can help people. And so that's why I ended up wearing multiple hats in my life and doing many things, is because I just keep saying yes, how I can help. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. I want to pass to the second part.
Yes.
And I have a few questions from actual women. So I would like to read them for you, and maybe we can help to give them an answer. So one is coming from a young lady. She's actually a physician. Her name is Shivani, very young. And she's asking you how certain parts of the cycle affects efficacy of a medication regimen, if we know. In example, worse of the symptom in the luteal phase, which I think we already mentioned, but maybe to repeat.
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit. And that's the study that I'm trying to run right now. We started looking into that a little bit. And we noticed that the work we've been doing so far is using self-reported data. But as I said, my ideal study, if I were to have additional funding, would be to actually collect quantitative data to prove how fluctuations in ovarian hormones actually correlate with changes in symptoms and in drug efficacy. And so we know that. We know that happens, but we need large cohort to really prove it, yes.
Question from Linda. How much levodopa should a woman take compared to a man, if any difference is relevant, and especially in relation to hormonal fluctuation and menopause?
Okay, I think we touched on that as well a little bit. As I said, that there hasn't been a clinical trial comparing how to adjust the dosage between men and women. So we don't really know how to adjust it. Right now, the medication is provided by body weight, but we do know that even though we adjust it by body weight, men and women metabolize medications differently, that because of hormones, we can also have a different efficacy of the medication. So I don't have the answer to that. And the second part of the question was?
How this relate, or maybe in a difference, like specifically with men, how the different medication should be taken?
Yeah, we don't have that answer, unfortunately. We don't. But it's something that I think it is important to answer as soon as possible, because it's something that challenges the doctors, the neurologists, because they also don't know how to help women. They prescribe, again, the medication based on body weight, but they don't know how to help women when they report feeling worse or debilitating symptoms, and the medication is not helping as much as it should. So, yeah.
Jane, she was also asking a question on hormonal replacement therapy, but you exhaustively also already answered to that. So I will just change a little bit the question, asking you then, what do you think we all should be doing to raise more the voice of women, to really get the funding, to really be able to do the research? Because, and we were talking this while coming here to the studio, the money that we spend on Parkinson, it's way more than diabetes, dementia, and even heart disease all combined together. So it's so bizarre, and it's at the same time frustrating that we are not having the funding for that research. So what would you like to see on a societal level to happen so that we can actually get that research done?
I think what we have to show the numbers. We have to show that, and there are reports already starting to show the numbers. One thing that is coming up out of all these reports is that Parkinson's disease is the fastest growing neurological disorder. So it's going to surpass Alzheimer's and all the other ones in terms of numbers, both men and women. Okay. And that's an important thing to know because the healthcare system is not getting ready to handle all these individuals they're going to present with this disorder. We're not ready. The doctors are not ready to support all the individuals that are going to develop Parkinson's disease. We're not ready. And so we have to be ready. And another thing that we have to show is that we don't have these reports, but one thing to really convince the policymakers that we need to invest more is to show how much we are spending right now in healthcare that we could be saving by helping people with Parkinson's, how much we're spending in hospital cost, in medication cost that we could be saving if we were putting more into research, into support, and into healthcare support for the patients.
Always, Jane. Another question or insight I'd like to explore more is pelvic floor health for women with Parkinson. I'm struggling hard in this area. I know there are pelvic floor specialists who can help, but what can I do day to day to help with this? For some reason, I find my issues are particularly bad during my menstrual cycle. Is there any correlation there, if we know?
There could be. I usually, when a person asks me for medical advices, I tend to refer them to their own physician because I don't know their whole medical history. And it's better that they talk to the person that knows their whole medical history. And again, it's not a single individual. It could be that they have a whole team or individuals that help them on different aspects. So I would refer her to the physical therapist or whoever is helping her. And I think it has to be a tailored approach depending on what kind of symptoms she's experiencing specifically, because pelvic floor symptoms are not, it's a very general term. It's not the same for everyone. It could be urinary, it could be rigidity, it could be due to many things. And so I think it has to be a deeper conversation with a healthcare provider that can help her. But hormones could be involved. They could. But I don't think we know much. I'm sorry if sometimes my answer always ends is, I don't think we know much. But it's probably gives you the understanding of the urgency into how much we need to study this more.
Yeah, and that's why I really like this conversation. So, thank you for all this because I think you're really giving a clear idea to all people with PD, what is the state of the art. And sometimes, because of fear of PD progressing and the frustration, it's easy to try to find the culprit or point the finger and say the doctor is not helping, but doctors are helping. It's just that we really don't know a few things. So thank you for putting it in such a very elegant way and clearly out them for, being fair also to everybody. I think this next question is very interesting. It comes from Cheryl. How can we develop the narrative and educate health professionals to recognize and address the difference in the ways the condition manifests in women and men?
Funny you should mention that. Yesterday I was attending the leadership forum at the World Parkinson's Congress, and the same question was asked. And many people agree that education on Parkinson's disease should start as early as medical school, which I agree to. Unfortunately, the medical school education does not include, and I think that's general worldwide, the medical school education does not include specialization into neurology or urology, any possible, again, specialty is just you do that during residency. And so I find it difficult. It's something that I would love that to happen, but I find it difficult to go back into med school and do a full training on Parkinson's disease, because that will require full training on Alzheimer's or full training on any possible disease the human body experiences. Perhaps a little bit of it would help, so that would support the doctors when they get into residency to be a little bit more prepared. That would be one way. And another solution that we were discussing would be to do perhaps once a year follow-up training, so that the doctors could catch up a little bit on all the new developments, both medically and research-wise, because they do not, unfortunately, have the time. Sometimes their commitment in the hospital and the practice are so heavy that doesn't allow them to catch up on everything. Mm-hmm. And that's not because they don't want to. It's just these commitments are so, again, so heavy that it's difficult to fit everything in the schedule. So,
more than a question, sort of, let's say, fact and question from Debbie. If those with lower lifetime estrogen exposure had significantly reduced dopamine transporter availability in the putamen and needed faster increase in levodopa doses, it's true, that's me. In fact, after quasi-regular periods ages from 14 to 16, I started distance running and had almost no periods from age 17 till 45. I then enjoyed mostly regular periods and perimenopausal night sweat till around age 53, when they were wildly irregular till my last cycle at age 54. I had fast levodopa increase and now the 5-LF pump. Is this true and common in many women?
I think as a general concept, it is accepted that if you have low exposure to estrogen during your reproductive years, you may have, I think this what overall this is saying is you have a increased risk of developing Parkinson's, and you could have a faster progression, so you need more medication as an overall concept, okay? Again, because the disease is very complex, I see every individual as his own island, and because is a multifactorial disease, hormones are not the only factor that comes into play. So if in her case that applies, doesn't mean that it would apply in the case of the next person, because the next person may have a different genetic background or different environmental exposure. I wouldn't make a cookie cutter, case, and wouldn't apply this to every woman that experiences the same situation. So, but as a general concept, it makes sense. Yes.
Okay. Part 3, and this is very exciting for our audience, they will see the massive amount of work that you do and the different hats that you wear. After the World Parkinson Congress 2013, you didn't just go back to the lab. You co-founded Stop PT. What did you hear from patients that made you realize something else is necessary? And please tell us more about your initiative.
Well, I went there as a scientist, excited to present my science, and then I start talking to the patient, and what I see and I heard was urgency and need for action. And I started thinking, is my science bringing this urgency, bringing this action next year? And I realized, no, it's not. So I have to do something now while we all as a scientist develop this cure that we don't know when it's going to come, soon or in a little longer stretch, I thought. So, so I decided that I needed to take action and do something that could help them on a daily basis. And what better to help them with complementary programs that are, one thing I want to say is that, want to be clear, they are not substitutive to medications, they're complementary. Mm-hmm. And so they support the whole pharmaceutical approach, let's put it that way. So they should not replace the medications, but together with the medication, they create a big boost to improvement in symptoms, improvement in quality of life, and which I experienced firsthand by working with people with Parkinson's. And I went back to New York, brought on board my husband, who had no say in that.
Let's say hello to him also.
Hi, Alex. He had no say in that. No, he was very happy to do that, to jump on board in this project. And we started with a high-intensity exercise program first. And then Alex has a very creative brain and immediately started thinking about what else can we do to tackle the symptoms. Because we started with the exercise program, but then as we were developing and tailoring and improving this exercise program, I realized that, as many of us know, exercise doesn't only help with physical symptoms, helps also with psychological component. Then he started thinking, what other programs can we develop also to help with other aspects of the disease, with other symptoms? And he happens to be an actor, and he started thinking, what skills do I have that I can use to develop new programs? And then he developed a program in collaboration with New York University as well, a theater program where he applies his acting skills to help patients with cognitive issues, with voice, vocalization issues, and so on and so on. So he keeps thinking about, what can I do next? What can I develop next? And that's where we are. And it's very exciting.
What are some beautiful stories that you encountered in Stop PD? So beyond exercise, you indeed incorporate art programs, the positive mindset shift. How do you see that these complementary approaches help not just motor symptoms, but really the emotional and cognitive?
Right. I think there are two different aspects. One is physiological and one emotional. They're almost the same thing, though, because if I think at the chemical level, they're the same thing. So all the programs that we do, and not just a Stop PD, I think all the complementary programs, when they are run in a way that really support the quality of life of an individual and improves the quality of life, it gives them it lifts their spirit, it helps them. Even just helping them physically, it really helps them emotionally. And that's one component. And then when the programs come in the format of a group class, that's an additional layer. Some people prefer individual exercise, and that's always a preference. And the other layer is at the chemical level. We know that exercise, for instance, not only increases neuroplasticity, not only increases release of dopamine, but we know that dopamine is not only involved in motor function. Dopamine is involved in regulating cognitive function. It's involved in regulating reward and mood. And so there are multiple layers in which these programs can really help and integrate. Let's put it this way. So that's how I look at them. I don't look at them individually. I don't look at them how each program can help one aspect only. I see how like they are an intricate net of support all around.
Yeah. So for people, like the take-home message would be always to look into all these approaches complementary.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. I think I could continue talking to you for like literally hours and days because it's so interesting. But we are almost at the end, and we have a small tradition, a small last game at this podcast. It's the 90-second rapid fire challenge.
Okay, that makes me nervous.
No, trust me. It's easy, but with some, I think, relevant question.
Okay.
Very like conversational from your side. So I will have 3 questions for you.
Okay.
First, one question the field is not asking enough, but it should.
That's obvious. Women on Parkinson's disease.
Second, one thing you would completely change or reprogram about Parkinson care.
Reprogram. I think we need within the hospital, it's starting, but we need these complementary approaches to come within the hospitals. And they are starting, but there is a lot of challenges to bring them in because of health insurance, roadblocks and stuff. But I think until we bring them in where they can be covered by insurance, we won't be able to really provide them for everyone. Because right now, we can only provide them to people that can either afford them when they have to pay for them, or only to people that are lucky enough that can access them for free when they are provided for free. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of individuals that are left out, when they can either not travel to where they are or not pay for it. And only when they can really be provided in big spaces, and they can be provided at a multidisciplinary way, right? Not just a single program 1 day a week, like we were saying earlier. Until that shift happens, then a lot of people will be left out.
Question number 3. It has 2 mirroring parts. One thing that you think is scientifically true, but wildly misunderstood, and vice versa, one thing that is widely believed, but it is actually incorrect.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the animal studies, not just animals, to the studies that include men and women. And it is that studies have not included women and have not included females because I always thought they would make the study more complicated. And that has left huge gaps in our knowledge, and that left women behind. And that's where we are right now. So that was a misconception. And it may be true sometimes. There are some things that we need to be aware. Sometimes some differences need to be accounted for, and they could, yes, make things more challenging, but those challenges need to be faced in order to uncover the truth.
Mm-hmm. It resonates, this last part, because based on my extra background, even coming from sport physiology, sports science, and movement science, the complexity of our hormones is actually seen as a complication,
right?
Like really roadblocks, and then giving even very wrong, say, guidelines or advices in how women should train, maybe even it changes through the cycle, and sometimes we know it's just not true.
Right.
I would like you to pose a question. So for my next guest,
Okay.
And I can tell you only that this guest is a woman as well. She's very passionate about women's research. She thinks a major, say, revolution as well has to happen, not only in the clinical part for people and women with PD, even for scientists, and specifically women scientists in the field. So any question that you might have for her that you would like her to possibly answer on my next podcast?
I would like to ask, because I think we talk so much about women and Parkinson's. We cover so much. I think the conundrum is, how do we pass these challenges of convincing policymakers and funders to support where we want to go? How do we get the funding to actually really do the research that we need to do to support women with Parkinson's disease?
It's challenging. I like it. I will let you know the answer as soon as I have it.
Sounds good.
Professor Roberta Marongiu, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I have to say that I am, a woman myself, passionate myself about PD and women, but meeting you today in person for the first time, it has been an honor, and I think it's really an inspiration and a boost even forward for myself and my career. So thank you, and thank you for giving so many valuable advices for all our listeners.
Thank you for having me. It was
Have
a
a good
pleasure.
day.